The room was made of glass, cold, white, and filled with the kind of silence that precedes a sentence. I sat across from the vice president and my direct manager, both with measured expressions, eyes downcast, hands folded over reports I'd prepared myself. 15 years of work summarized in performance spreadsheets. 15 years of targets met, crises overcome, clients recovered. 15 years of loyalty. And then, in a soft, almost rehearsed voice, the VP said, "You're excellent, my name. But we no longer believe you fit the image we want to portray." The word image hung in the air, wafting like a toxic perfume. He spoke as if announcing a logo change, not a layoff. I tried to breathe, but the air felt too thin. "Image," I repeated, and he nodded, adjusting his jacket. "It's a matter of brand positioning, of corporate aesthetics." The manager next to him added with an uncomfortable smile, "It's not personal, you understand. It's about visual coherence." Visual coherence. I looked at them and understood, without needing translation. It wasn't about results, it was about skin, about hair, about the fact that, in an environment that claimed to be modern and diverse, I still stood out from the crowd. On the wall behind them, a panel with the company's slogan stared back at me. "We are us." None of the faces in the photo looked like me. The cold chair seemed to push me out. Every word they said became more distant, more abstract. "Let's make room for a new profile," the VP continued. "Someone more aligned with the brand's visual identity." I could have sworn the air conditioning had turned up the volume. My hands were clasped tightly in my lap, but inside I was trembling. I thought about all the nights spent turning over spreadsheets, every piece of feedback that said, "Great job, but you need to tone it down." Every team event where I was asked to take a photo and then never posted it. I thought about all the times I'd changed my hair, my tone of voice, my style of dress, not out of vanity, but for survival. And now, after all that, I still didn't fit the image. I took a deep breath and asked, "And what happens to my position?" The VP looked to the manager, who answered for him. "We'll provide a graceful transition. You can train the person who will replace you." I felt a bitter taste in my mouth, like metal. Dignified. The word sounded nice, but what they wanted was for me to erase my own history with a professional smile. I looked around. The glow of the screens, the reflection of the glass, the two men in suits watching me as if they were doing the right thing. I picked up the report from the table and leafed through it slowly. Every number proved the opposite of what they said. Solid, consistent, unquestionable results. I closed the folder and set it on the table. "You're right," he said finally, with a smile they didn't understand. "It really is about image." The VP looked relieved, thinking I agreed. But inside something stirred, something ancient, sharp and calm. It wasn't anger. It was strategy. As they talked about timelines and next steps, I simply watched. Each word became a piece in the puzzle I was beginning to piece together. With each sentence, I mentally recorded the expressions, the tone, the excessive care with words, the kind of care that only appears when there's guilt. When I left the room, the hallway seemed longer than ever. The white walls reflected my face, and for a second, I saw not a defeated woman, but a woman mirrored and whole. 15 years had taught me that silence is a form of strength, and I had just rediscovered mine. At the end of the hallway, the mural flashed in the cold light. "We are us," I smiled to myself. Maybe it was time to show them what that really meant. As I passed the glass, I saw my reflection and thought, if it's about image, then it's my turn to project the truth. When I returned to my desk, the voices in the office sounded distant, almost metallic, as if I'd passed through an invisible glass separating me from everyone there. The cold light from the screens reflected on the concentrated faces, and for a moment, I realized no one noticed what had just happened. It had been like this for years. I could disappear into their midst and the world would remain the same. I opened my laptop and let the cursor blink over the goals spreadsheet. 15 years of impeccable results, and now, that constant blinking seemed to mock me. In the corner of the screen, the intranet icon displayed the new internal campaign banner. "Image matters. Be the face of our brand." My stomach churned. Clicking on the link, I found a photo gallery. Smiling faces, standardized uniforms, and an optimistic caption. None of those smiles looked like me. I closed the tab and took a deep breath. I remembered the little things, the ones that hurt slowly. The times I was asked to tone it down in meetings because my voice took up too much space. From the comments about my hair when I left it natural. It looks so pretty, but maybe for outdoor events something more straightened out would be better. From the team photos where I always appeared on the edges, or was accidentally cut in the final edit. The times when my project credits appeared under another manager's name. To simplify, I reached for the badge still hanging around my neck. The metallic reflection revealed a tired but awake face. For the first time, I understood that I didn't need permission to exist there. I needed proof. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it, Image is Not Equal to Merit. Inside it, I created subfolders with simple titles. Projects, emails, acknowledgements, anomalies, and I started saving everything. Screenshots of thank you messages that were never made public. Reports with my name in the footer and final credit given to others. Undocumented feedback passed on by myself. Everything. As the files piled up, I felt something growing inside me. It wasn't anger, it was method. I'd always been good with data, and now I would use the same logic that underpinned the company's reports to support my own truth. In the midst of this, a thought crossed my mind. How many stories like mine die inside offices like this, suffocated by corporate smiles and neutral words? How many Black women are called inspiring when they remain silent, but problematic when they speak? I stopped for a moment and looked around. People were talking about goals, meetings, deadlines, the same old chatter. But I knew. Everything was about to change. I remembered my mother's voice when I was still a student, saying I wanted to move up in life. She smiled and replied, "Move up, daughter. But never settle for a ceiling that's too low." I understood late what she meant. At that moment, I realized that for years, I'd been putting my head down to avoid hitting that ceiling. Now I wanted to break it. I opened my notebook and wrote a simple sentence, which was more of a reminder than a plan. When the truth is well organized, no one can call it drama. As I typed, I felt like taking a deep breath and talking to someone who has experienced the same kind of silence. If you've ever swallowed humiliation disguised as praise, if you've ever been told to tone it down while they slowly erased you, stay with me. I know exactly what it's like. And I promise you, there comes a time when the truth screams louder than any pretty speech. I turned off the computer but left the folder open. The name Image is Not Equal to Merit glowed in the corner of the screen like a newly planted seed. Before I left, I glanced at the banner on the wall, the one with the phrase, "Image Matters." I smiled slightly and thought, so that's where they're going to fall. I spent the entire weekend sitting at my computer, the curtains closed, the sound of my keyboard filling the apartment. Outside, the world went on as usual. Families in the park, cars honking, the smell of cooking wafting from the windows. But inside, time was different. I wasn't just reviewing files. I was reconstructing a story, my own. I opened old reports, forgotten emails, backups I'd made without thinking. Each document seemed to tell me a new version of the same story. A Black woman who delivered more than was asked for but received less than she deserved. In that silent dawn, I realized how much corporate racism is an expert at camouflage. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It comes in backhanded praise, opportunities that haven't arrived yet, and smiles that don't touch the eyes. I organized everything in a personal audit spreadsheet. Name, date, result, author, recognition. With each line, I saw an injustice taking concrete form. My work had saved contracts, reversed crises, trained leaders. And yet, it never made it into public presentations. In the middle of the screening, I found an old document from the Human Resources Department. Corporate Identity Guide. I flipped through it out of curiosity. The first few pages talked about values, ethics, and inclusion. But in the last few, I found something that made me stop. A section called Professional Posture and Appearance. It said, "The appearance must convey neutrality, aesthetic harmony, and visual confidence." Neutrality. A dangerous word. I read it several times, feeling the metallic taste it left. Deep down it was a polite way of saying, be invisible but smile. The monitor's reflection illuminated my face. I saw the deep circles under my eyes, my natural hair, my straight shoulders. For years I tried to fit into that neutrality. I traded colors for neutral tones, my earrings for discretion, my voice for caution. And still, it was always almost. That morning I understood. The problem was never that I was out of place. It was that they wanted to mold the world to fit into frames that were too small. I wrote in large letters in my notebook, the system is polite, but it is not innocent. I started separating the files by themes, proof of authorship, exclusion evidence, evidence of private praise. I created a special tab, backstage voices. There I saved direct messages from colleagues who asked me for help resolving crises and then presented the results as if they were their own. I copied the dates, times, and signatures. Each pixel was a testimony. The clock read 3:17 a.m. when I closed my laptop. My eyes burned, but the fatigue was accompanied by a rare lucidity. With each test I organized, a part of the pain faded. It was as if I were assembling a mirror that reflected not only what they had done to me, but everything I had always tried to deny. I remembered what the VP had said, "You don't fit the image we want to project," and realized how absurd that was. I was the real image. The image they produce, sustain, and never show. The image they use but don't show. I grabbed my phone and took a screenshot of the spreadsheet. Not out of vanity but as a symbol. It was the first time I'd seen my own worth quantified, and not distorted. Before going to sleep, I left the folder image is not equal to right open on the desktop, and I stuck a post-it on the monitor. The data doesn't lie. And I'm not going to lie to myself anymore. I lay down, unable to close my eyes. Outside, the distant sound of a siren cut through the air. I knew that the next morning I would return to the office a different person. Between sleep and wakefulness, I imagined the VP's face as I turned each line of that spreadsheet into light, and I thought, they called me shadow, but they forget that it is the shadow that reveals where the light comes from. On Monday, I entered the building like someone walking through a minefield. Every step calculated, every glance too heavy to be casual. The lobby had the same cold glow as always, the same smell of stale coffee and expensive perfume, but nothing else felt the same. I was no longer the woman who accepted silence as part of the job. Now silence was my weapon. I swiped my badge and felt the reader beep as a reminder. I'm still part of it. I walked down the main hallway and noticed some colleagues look away. Others pretended not to see me. Ever since the meeting with the VP, the rumor had been circulating around the tables. But as always, no one said anything. Corporate racism has this knack. Everyone sees it, but few name it. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started the day as if nothing had happened. The difference was that now I was observing everything. The jokes in the messaging groups, the selective lunch invitations, the meetings that, accidentally, forgot to include me. Everything was a clue, and I didn't intend to waste any of it. Around 11, the manager stopped by my station. He smiled with the same air of false cordiality as always. "How are you, my name? I hope you're coping well with the changes. Sometimes the market demands repositioning." I replied calmly without looking up. "Yes, I'm repositioning myself. And you?" He swallowed hard. He left without waiting for an answer. In the team's Slack, a new conversation was emerging about brand repositioning. I opened the channel and saw a comment from him to the group. "We need someone with a more relaxed and fluid profile to represent this new phase. Light and fluent. Clean codes to say, white and reliable." I took a screenshot and saved it in the folder anomalies. Later, a colleague invited me over for coffee. She was one of the few who always looked me in the eye. She spoke softly, stirring the sugar. "You didn't hear this from me, but there's an audio recording going on." "Audio?" I asked. "Yes, from a conversation between the manager and the new coordinator. He talks about you. It's not pretty." My heart beat faster, but my expression didn't change. Do you have this? She nodded and sent me the file right there via chat with the message. Careful, it's heavy. I waited for the shift to end. Only at home with the lights off did I press play. His voice filled the room. Calm, confident, the same one I heard in meetings. She's excellent, but she's not the stage person. The VP wants someone who represents the client. She's great backstage. A muffled laugh. So let her train the new ones, she does it well. More laughter. Silence. Pause. The sound echoed in my head like a confession. There it was, what I'd always known but had never heard so starkly. It wasn't my competence, it was my face, my hair, my presence. And the most perverse thing was that they spoke naturally, without guilt, like someone commenting on the weather. I played it back, this time paying attention to the pauses, the tones, the smiles. Every second of that audio was a test. I copied it, saved it, transcribed it. I named the file, backstagetruth.wave. As I saved him, I felt a strange mixture of pain and peace. The pain came from recognition, proof of what they had always denied. The peace came from certainty. I wasn't crazy. I stood there for a while, staring at the screen. The mouse pointer trembled over the file name. I remembered all the times people told me, "You interpret too much. Don't take it personally. We're a family here." No family humiliates out loud and calls it an adjustment. I took my notebook and wrote just one sentence. If they relegated me to the backstage, it's because they know I have too much light for their stage. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the city slept. Inside me, something was stirring, something that blended strategy with justice. Before I went to sleep, I decided that audio would not stay hidden. Next week, there would be all hands meeting, the quarterly event broadcast to the entire company. And it was there, in front of everyone, that I planned to turn on the spotlight. In the days that followed, everything seemed clearer, as if the veil had fallen. Words that had previously sounded neutral now had weight, intention, direction. I observed the gestures, the emails, the smiles that came with a "but." And I realized how practiced racism is when it wants to appear professional. On Tuesday, the manager gathered the team to present the new project. The slides opened on the conference room screen, and it took me a few seconds to recognize the content. It was my report, my study, my text word for word, just with a different name in the footer. "Congratulations to Daniel for the initiative," the manager said, smiling for the cameras. I stood still. No one looked at me. It was the most quietly violent scene I've ever experienced. I observed everything in detail. His posture as he leaned forward in his chair, his practiced tone of voice, his use of expressions like innovative, strategic, visionary. All words that had once been used to describe my work, and now sounded like echoes, stolen. When the meeting ended, I slowly closed my laptop. On the way back to my desk, I heard a whispered comment from a colleague. "Wow, she's completely lost." She had no idea I had a whole foundation growing inside. I waited for the office to empty. I went to the printer and reprinted the original version of the report, the one with my digital signature and the system metadata. I compared the two versions side by side. His, presented as a new idea, had been downloaded from my drive 2 days earlier. The access log was there, in the audit trail. I saved the printout. I named the file theftanauthorship.pdf. At that moment, I realized I didn't need to shout anymore. I just needed to organize. Every injustice they'd tried to hide was now becoming evidence. Every microaggression was becoming data. At night at home, I sat in front of the folder image is not equal to right and I began reviewing everything I'd saved. The audio, the emails, the reports, the photos of events where I never appeared. The narrative was complete. All that was missing was the denouement, the moment when they would be forced to see what they'd always tried to erase. But before I fell asleep, a doubt crossed my mind. Was it worth it? Did I really want this war? I closed my eyes and remembered my mother's voice. "Daughter, they'll call you difficult when you stop accepting less." I opened my eyes. Fear had a name, and it was customary. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. In the break room, the marketing team was discussing the week's campaign. "Diversity is our differentiator." I smiled to myself. The irony no longer hurt me, nourished me. I returned to my desk, opened the corporate chat, and began responding to messages from colleagues who were discreetly expressing their solidarity. One wrote, "We see you, even when they try to hide you." And it was there, in that moment, that I realized the power of telling the truth. Not to destroy but to illuminate. If you've ever experienced something similar, you know what it's like to swallow an injustice in silence so as not to appear bitter. You know what it's like to smile when all you want to do is scream. But believe me, there comes a day when silence stops being a shield and becomes a strategy. And that's exactly what happened to me. That afternoon, I opened my email and found the official invitation. All hands meeting, theme, the face of the company. I felt goosebumps all over my body. They were giving me the stage themselves. I took my cell phone, created a new folder on the drive with the name Showtime, and into it I dragged all the files. The audio, the original report, the screenshots, the guideline. The plan was in motion. In the days leading up to Thiel Hands, I became two people. The one who carried out her tasks normally, responding to emails punctually, attending meetings with a controlled smile. And the other, silent, observant, patient, who drew up a meticulous plan to give the company back the recognition it insisted on denying. I arrived early and left late as usual, which made it easier to disguise what I was really doing. Instead of reports, I reviewed evidence. Instead of cost spreadsheets, I created a timeline. Date, evidence, context, responsible parties. Every fragment of veiled racism was there, documented with the precision of an audit. At night, at home, the monitor's light was the only source of light in the darkness. I played the audio over and over, adjusting the volume to capture nuances, pauses, and breaths. I recorded a transcribed version, subtitled it, and saved it in various formats. Then I combined the evidence. The audio, the edited reports, the screenshots, the appearance guide, the emails that said, "You're essential but not the ideal face." It was a complete story, told by themselves. I created a slide deck short. Only 10 screens. No speeches, just facts. It began with a sentence that would appear on the screen in white letters on a black background. They said I wasn't the face of the company. Next would come what no one could dispute. Data, evidence, voice. I closed the file and saved it with a new name. Truth and Presentation PPTeX. I spent the next day discreetly testing the auditorium's equipment, under the pretense of preparing the quarterly report. I checked audio compatibility, connectors, and video delay. Everything worked perfectly. The sound technician, unknowingly, was helping me secure the stage for the reveal. Meanwhile, I observed the management's movements. The VP walked the halls with his usual calm air, patting people on the shoulder. The manager avoided me, perhaps out of guilt or foreboding. HR published motivational posts about the importance of empathetic listening. The irony was almost poetic. On Wednesday, the lawyer I'd texted got back to me. We met at a discreet cafe 2 blocks from the firm. She listened to me in silence, reviewed some of the material and said calmly, "You have more than enough. But if you want to do this, you need to be prepared for impact." I replied without hesitation. Impact is what they feel when someone breaks the mold. She nodded and handed me a flash drive. "Keep a copy here, encrypted, and send another to a secure email address." I returned home with a flash drive in my bag, its weight reminding me that fear no longer ruled me. I opened the window, breathed in the cool night air, and thought about how many women had been through the same thing, and how many would still be going through it if I kept quiet. Revenge wasn't about shouting. It was about showing. It was about projecting the truth before everyone, without a word of hate, without a gesture of violence. Letting the facts speak, cold, clear, indisputable. On Thursday night, I prepared my outfit for the next day. No suit, no heels. I wore what they always tried to erase. My natural hair, a brightly colored blouse, and large earrings that spoke of who I was before they tried to polish me. I looked in the mirror and recognized myself for the first time in a long time. The firm face, the calm gaze, the same smile they tried to neutralize. I took the flash drive from my bag, held it in the palm of my hand and whispered, "You said I wasn't the right image. Tomorrow, I'll be the reflection you never wanted to see. The calendar on the computer screen flashed. Friday, 10 a.m., all hands. The face of the company. I smiled slowly. The countdown had begun. Friday began with a kind of light that precedes storms. Cold, bluish, almost metallic. The city was still waking up when I left home. On the way, I saw the reflection of my face in the subway window. Serene, but with something new in its gaze. A calm that came not from resignation, but from preparation. I arrived early. The auditorium was still being set up. Technicians were adjusting cables, sound technicians were testing microphones. The screen was projecting the company logo repeatedly, as if trying to hypnotize me again. The face of the company, the theme emblazoned in capital letters, seemed like a direct provocation. I greeted the audio technician, the same one I'd helped with the projector a few days earlier. "Is everything okay with the system?" asked casually. He replied with a smile. "Everything's running perfectly." He added, unaware of the weight of his words, "No one's going to delete anything today, that's guaranteed." I went to my desk and completed the first tasks of the day as if it were just another Friday. At 9, the manager walked by. The strong scent of his perfume always made me nauseous. "Are you going to the event?" he asked, adjusting his blazer. "Of course," I replied. "Especially this one." He laughed, not understanding the irony. At 10, the aisles began to empty. Everyone was walking toward the auditorium. I grabbed my flash drive, discreetly tucked it into my inside blazer pocket, and followed behind. Inside, the air was already heavy. The chairs lined up in rows, the stage lit up, the audience murmuring. The VP was in the front row, adjusting his lapel microphone, smiling for the cameras. I pressed my fingers against the flash drive, feeling the cold metal. I had mentally rehearsed every detail. The timing of my speech, the exact moment to project the first slide, the intonation of the question that would open the session. It had to appear spontaneous, but nothing there was random. As the first corporate videos played on the screen, smiling white faces over impactful phrases, I looked around and noticed something symbolic. Black female employees were scattered in the background, almost all standing with no reserved seating. It was a physical reflection of the invisible hierarchy that underpinned that beautiful discourse. The VP took the stage. His voice was the same as always, thick and practiced. "Today we celebrate who we are. The image we present to the world is the fruit of all of you." Polite applause. He continued, "And we want to present our new corporate face, an identity that reflects the spirit of the brand." My heart was beating steadily. My right hand was already on the projector control. I waited for the next sentence. "But first, we open it up for quick questions. Would anyone like to share anything about our culture?" I raised my hand. Silence fell like a curtain. The VP hesitated, but there was no denying it. "Of course, my name." I grabbed the microphone. My voice came out calm, firm, and clear. "I have a simple question. When we talk about image, are we talking about results or appearance?" The VP smiled, disconcerted. "Excellent question. Image is a set of factors. It's about how the public perceives us." I pressed the button. The screen went blank for a second, then came back on with the first screen of my file. White letters on a black background. They said I wasn't the face of the company. The room held its breath. Next came the charts. 15 years of results, goals surpassed, internal accolades. Then came the email screenshots, the reports, and finally the audio. The manager's voice echoed through the speakers. "She's great, but she doesn't have the stage look." Muffled laughter, the dry sound of the microphone hitting the table. The silence that followed was so heavy that the air seemed to stop. I designed the last screen. A simple sentence, without a signature. "When the image is a lie, the facts speak for themselves." No one moved. The VP stared at the floor. The manager stood motionless, pale. The sound technician, perhaps not understanding the full context, kept everything on air. I grabbed the microphone. "This is the real face of the company. The one who works, delivers, but doesn't show up. Today she's here. Timid applause began in the background. Then it grew louder. The sound spread until it filled the entire auditorium. Before I got off the stage, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. An anonymous message flashed on the screen. Transmission recorded. Automatic sending complete. The sound of applause was still echoing when I left the stage. It started out timid, uncertain, but grew quickly, as if each clap released something long trapped in the auditorium. The VP struggled to maintain his composure, his face rigid, his professional smile trembling at the edges. The manager, who had previously gesticulated confidently, now stared at the floor, his face pale, his hand clenched around his cell phone as if he could undo what had been said. As I walked down the aisle between the chairs, I saw faces that had never looked at me before. There was surprise, guilt, respect, and something else, recognition. People didn't know whether to applaud me out of courage or relief. I knew what it was. It was the sound of a lie crumbling. I sat in the last row, took a deep breath, and watched the silent chaos unfold. The event moderator tried to regain control, announcing that the company values dialogue, and that everything would be duly investigated. But no one was listening. All eyes were fixed on the stage and the still-lit screens, where my last sentence remained stubbornly projected. When the image is a lie, the facts speak for themselves. The sound technician, confused, approached and asked if he should end the broadcast. I responded with a simple gesture. I let the video play for a few more seconds, long enough for everyone there to see themselves reflected. When the event ended, I left before anyone tried to approach me. The hallway seemed longer than ever, but this time the silence didn't oppress me, it protected me. I took the elevator alone. I glanced at the metallic reflection of the door and saw something new. My face wasn't trembling. Downstairs the phone vibrated non-stop. Messages poured in. Colleagues at headquarters, former employees, even people from other units. The video is circulating. You were incredible. Finally, someone had the courage. The file had been leaked. And I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was fate. On the way home, social media was already buzzing. A snippet of the video was being shared in internal and then external groups. The audio, the phrase, the VP's face, motionless under the lights. It all went viral. Someone wrote, "The company's face has fallen." Another replied, "This woman exposed the entire system." I sat on the bus seat, leaned my forehead against the window, and let the landscape pass by in blurs of light. I wasn't afraid. I felt a kind of electric peace, the kind that comes after a thunderclap. I no longer needed to say anything. The truth now had a voice of its own. When I got home, I took off my shoes, sat on the couch and stared at my phone screen. Hundreds of notifications. But what struck me most was a short message from a former employee I barely knew. "When you got on that stage, we all got on." Smiled. And I realized it wasn't about me anymore. It was about all the people left behind. I took the notebook and wrote at the top of a new folder, "The truth already walks alone." I saved the full video, the original audio, and the evidence file. Below, a note, "So that no one ever needs to doubt their own worth again." Meanwhile, the news spread. The company, under pressure, issued a generic statement. "We are committed to diversity and ethics. We will investigate what happened." Chuckled. It was the kind of sentence you write when the panic is too great to admit guilt. I walked out onto the balcony. The night wind was cold but pleasant. The city lights flickered like tiny beacons. I thought about how many people were watching that video. How many Black women would recognize themselves in my voice. And if you're listening to this story now, if you've ever felt erased, diminished, invisible, share it. Share not for me but for you and for all those who came before. Because when we spread the truth, it stops being hurt and becomes light. I took out my phone, recorded a short voice note and posted it alongside the original video. They said I didn't fit the company's profile. Now the company has to look at me. Late in the evening, as the video surpassed 100,000 views, a new message arrived from the lawyer. "We need to talk. Tomorrow morning. They want to negotiate." I didn't sleep that night. My phone vibrated non-stop. Notifications, unknown calls, messages from journalists, activist profiles, co-workers who until yesterday had pretended not to see me. The video had left the internal networks and taken over the world. It was impossible to contain it. The VP's face, frozen in front of the screen, was everywhere. Blogs, tweets, stories. The audio played on a loop, accompanied by indignant captions. The company's name rose in the headlines, trending topics along with the sentence I had designed. When the image is a lie, the facts speak for themselves. The early morning hours brought a strange feeling, of calm and alertness at the same time. I made coffee, sat at the table and took a deep breath. For so long I'd dreamed of justice. Now it stood before me, but it didn't come alone. Along with it came the fear of what would come next. At 8 o'clock sharp the phone rang. It was the lawyer. Her voice was firm but concerned. "They want to call you in for an emergency meeting. Legal will be there, along with HR and the board. Today. And one more thing, don't go alone. Record everything, register everything. And don't sign anything." I was silent for a moment. "They're going to try to shut me up, aren't they?" "They'll try to buy you out," she replied. "But the video is bigger than any deal." I hung up and stared out the window at the city. People hurried, cars honking, the day going on as normal, as if nothing had happened. But inside me, something was quietly settling. The truth, once exposed, cannot be withdrawn. I arrived at the company shortly before 10. The atmosphere was tense. No one spoke, no one smiled. Eyes followed me from the reception to the elevator, as if I were carrying dynamite in my bag. The company logo on the glass entrance seemed smaller, fragile. The meeting was scheduled in the same room where, weeks earlier, I'd been told I didn't look like the company. The contrast was too symbolic to be coincidental. When I walked in, everyone was already there. The legal director, the HR manager, the interim VP, and the same manager who laughed in the audio, now with his gaze downcast and his face swollen. The HR manager was the first to speak. "We want to express our condolences for what happened." The video took on unexpected proportions. "Unexpected?" I asked calmly. "Or inevitable?" The silence that followed was heavy. The interim VP cleared his throat and intervened. "We are conducting an independent investigation. In the meantime, Mr. Ricardo," he looked at the manager, "will be temporarily removed." The word temporarily made me want to laugh, but I held it back. The legal department opened a folder and pushed some documents toward me. "We acknowledge misconduct and would like to propose a confidentiality agreement. You would take a paid leave of absence, and the company, in return, agrees to review all diversity policies." I looked at the leaves, then at them. "You want me to disappear? Again?" "It's not that," the lawyer tried. "It's to protect you." "Protect from what?" "The truth." The lawyer's voice echoed in my head. "Don't sign anything." I closed the folder slowly. "I won't accept any deal. The truth isn't mine, it's public now. You can't buy what already belongs to the world." The manager looked at me, looking up for the first time. "You destroyed careers." "No. I just took the mirror off the wall." "You destroyed yourselves." The HR manager sighed wearily. "We need to wrap up this meeting." "Closing." "Only if it's the cycle," I replied, standing up. "Because the silence, that one, is over." I left the room feeling the ground firm under my feet. People in the hallway moved away as I passed, but there was something different in their eyes. Not fear, not pity. It was respect. In the elevator, a message arrived from the lawyer. "Congratulations! The Internal Ethics Committee will announce permanent removals. And they want to hear from you." Smiled. Inside, my whole body was shaking. As the elevator descended, I thought about how many times I'd left there with my head down. And now, finally, I was descending, raising what they'd tried to erase. My voice. When the doors opened, a clerk I'd never seen before handed me an envelope and whispered, "They left it for you at the front desk." Inside was an unsigned letter, and a sentence written in all caps. "You opened the door. Don't let it close." I put the envelope in my bag and left the building. The sun was beating down, but the air felt light, breathable, for the first time in a long time. I walked aimlessly, trying to process what had just happened. 15 years of silence, summed up in a meeting that ended without apologies, but with truths exposed. I sat on a nearby bench and opened the letter. The paper was plain, the handwriting firm, almost masculine. I read it slowly. "You don't know me, but I was in that room the day they said you didn't fit the company. Kept quiet. I regretted it. Thank you for doing what I didn't have the courage to do." There was no name, just an initial. For an instant, I felt something I hadn't expected. Compassion. Even among those who remained silent, some were trapped in the same fear that had kept me invisible for so many years. I went home and turned on the television. There was the news. Executives removed after allegations of structural racism at multinational company. The headlines varied, but the gist was the same. The company had become a symbol of a larger problem. And amid the avalanche of comments, one phrase recurred in every post. "She showed what happens when the truth is well documented." I closed my eyes and let the tears fall, unashamed. It wasn't sadness. It was a burning kind of relief. In the following days, the effects began to spread. The company announced an external audit, the creation of an independent ethics committee, and an immediate review of internal policies. The term visual neutrality was officially removed from all documents. On Tuesday morning, I received an email with the subject line, "Request to participate." The sender was the new acting director. "We would like to invite you to contribute to the restructuring of inclusion and representation policies. Your vision will be essential." I read and reread the invitation. Part of me wanted to decline. Another knew this was exactly where I belonged, not to legitimize but to rebuild. I entered the meeting room, this time not as a subordinate. The table was the same, but the chairs had changed. The atmosphere too. The director opened the agenda and gave me the floor. "We want to hear from you." I looked around. I saw different faces but also some familiar ones. "What happened in here is no exception," I began. "It's structure. And structure only changes with action, not with slogans." I presented data, proposed revisions, suggested that promotion processes be audited externally, and that every leadership decision be based on objective criteria, not impressions. When I finished, the silence was long, dense, and filled with respect. As I left, I received quiet applause. Not for the results, but for the courage to continue. And I knew. This was just the beginning. That night, the lawyer called me. "The preliminary report is out. The audit found enough evidence to permanently remove the VP. The company will release it tomorrow." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Then it's over." "No," she replied. "Now it begins." I logged off and stared at the ceiling. I thought about all the women who still haven't had the space to react, the ones who are still trying to prove the obvious. That competence has no color. I grabbed my laptop and started writing a new document, a record of the process. I titled it, "How to Dismantle a System Without Screaming." There I described each step, not as a denunciation but as a survival script. Because what I learned couldn't die with me. Before going to sleep, I reread the file and added one last line. Revenge was never about exposing the mistake, it was about teaching the world not to repeat it. Closed my laptop. The clock read 2:17 a.m. outside. The wind blew hard, and for the first time in years, I slept without the weight of my badge around my neck. The next morning I woke up to a notification. Invitation to a live interview, topic. What your story teaches us about power and truth. Smiled. This time the stage would be mine, and I would choose the light. The morning of the interview dawned with a heavy gray sky, but inside me the mood was different. Clear, firm, as if the storm had passed and the air was finally clear. I made my coffee and put on the clothes I'd always been denied. Bright colors, large earrings, my hair loose in all its glory, without asking permission to exist. The television studio was in the city center. Along the way, billboards flashed slogans that now seemed more fragile than ever. The face of the company. Image is everything. How many lives were shaped to fit these sentences? How many stories were erased to maintain the neutrality of those who never needed to prove themselves? When I arrived, a producer greeted me. Young, black, with a nervous smile. "I'm your fan," she said softly. "Thank you for doing what we dream of doing one day." I shook her hand and felt a lump rise in my throat. It was for her and for everyone that I was there. The interview began with predictable questions. How did you feel? What motivated you to expose the company? Are you afraid of reprisals? I answered without anger, without heroism, simply with the truth. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I wanted to rebuild myself. And when a black woman rebuilds herself in public, the world calls it a scandal. What is actually courage? The presenter was silent for a few seconds. It was the kind of silence that weighs more than 1,000 rounds of applause. I talked about the system, about how much the word professionalism was used to domesticate our presence. They teach us to be perfect to deserve the basics, to lower our voices to be heard, to smile while they steal our credit. But there comes a time when silence stops protecting and starts suffocating. The broadcast was live. As I spoke, messages began to pop up on social media. People shared excerpts, quoting my words. One wrote, "She didn't lose her job, she gained the mirror." I left the studio with a light heart and a kind of strength that can't be explained. Outside, the afternoon wind enveloped me like a hug. I picked up my phone and saw an unexpected notification. An email from the company's communications department. "The new repositioning campaign launches tomorrow. We'd love for you to be a part of it. As a voice and a face." I laughed to myself. It was ironic. They had once said I didn't fit the company's image, and now they wanted to turn me into a symbol. I opened the email, read it to the end, and simply replied, "If you have to show a face, let it be the faces of everyone you ignored. I'm in, if it's not about me but about us." I sent it and left my phone on the bench. The sun was beginning to break through the clouds. That night, the lawyer called me laughing. "You became what they feared most. Impossible to erase." "It wasn't revenge," I replied. "It was reparation." "And what are you going to do now?" "Teach," he said. "Tell. Expand." In the days that followed, invitations began to arrive. Lectures, panels, universities, foundations. They wanted to hear the story, to understand how to transform pain into action. I accepted some, declined others. I chose only those that allowed for collective voices. One afternoon I returned to the company. The new director was waiting for me in the reception area. "I have something I want to show you," he said. We went upstairs together. In the main hallway, where the face of the company mural had been, there was now another. Dozens of photos, different faces, full names. In the center, a new phrase. The image that was missing was always ours. I looked at it and felt the tears come, but this time without pain. It was beautiful, it was fair, it was true. The principal handed me a small plaque, in recognition of turning silence into change. I embraced it, but left one condition. "Don't honor me. Keep hiring." He smiled. "Deal." I returned to my office. Now the principal's. The windows reflected the sunset, and for a moment, I saw in the glass the reflection of who I was. The woman who kept quiet to fit in. I looked again and saw who I was now, the woman who speaks to make space. I took the old badge from the drawer and placed it next to the new one. One said manager, the other director. The difference between them wasn't the title, it was the voice. I received a message on my cell phone from a stranger. "I'm the new intern. I shared your story with my mom. She cried and said she now believes I can do it too." I took a deep breath and thought, this is how true legacy begins. Time passed. Not quickly, but at the precise pace of someone rebuilding their own foundations. Today, when I walk through the company lobby, the echo of my footsteps no longer sounds strange. Every glance you meet is a reminder of what has changed, and what it took to change. That auditorium, the same one where I was once silenced, now hosts inclusive leadership training sessions, led by women who once hid in the back rows. Sometimes I sit in the back just to observe. It's curious to see the same stage, the one I was denied, now filled with diverse faces, firm voices, and free laughter. None of them need to ask permission to exist. I learned that revenge isn't about shouting or hurting. It's about staying. It's about standing tall while the system crumbles around you, and then calmly rebuilding, piece by piece, until the new no longer needs justification to be just. At the end of one of these meetings, a young woman approached. Dark skin, long braids, a look that mixed strength and nervousness. "Can I hug you?" she asked. "Of course." She squeezed me tightly and whispered, "You opened the door. I came in." I closed my eyes and let the embrace linger. This was it. This was true justice, when pain becomes passage. Back in my office, I sat by the window, letting the sunset cast its orange hues over the glass. I grabbed a piece of paper and began writing the final part of the document I'd begun months ago. How to dismantle a system without screaming. The last line said, "They said I didn't look like the company. Now the company looks like me and like all of us. What they called rebellion was just dignity." Smiled. I folded the paper and put it inside the book that sat on my desk, among my notes and future plans. My phone vibrated with a notification. A new comment on the original video, posted months ago, still circulating online. Opened it. It was simple but perfect. She didn't want revenge. She wanted to exist. And that was enough to change everything. I closed my eyes for a moment. I remembered the woman who once cried alone in the bathroom after being told she didn't have the right image. I remembered the nights of doubt, the stolen reports, the audio that echoed like a sentence. And I realized, none of this destroyed me. It refined me. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and stared at myself unhurriedly. The reflection revealed a whole woman. Strong, serene, non-negotiable. I was no longer a shadow. I was projected light. I grabbed my new badge, hung it around my neck, and took a deep breath. From the hallway, someone knocked on the door. "Meeting in 5 minutes, Director." I nodded, smiling. "I'm coming." As I walked, I thought that maybe justice isn't about winning. It's about carrying on, even when they try to erase your name. And if you're listening to my story right now, if anyone ever tried to convince you that your brilliance was too much to handle, don't erase it. Transform. Rewrite. Exhibitions. Because kindness is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. And dignity. That is the most powerful form of revenge there is. If this story touched you, don't let it die here. Comment, share, subscribe. Not for me, but for all of us who continue writing one truth at a time. Close the living room door. Outside, the city throbbed. And inside me, finally, everything was at peace.